There's no doubt about it. Unless you're a beginner to training, building substantial muscle can be a painstakingly slow process. The last thing you want to do when you cut is sacrifice that muscle you worked so hard to obtain. So today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know on how to lose fat without losing muscle so you can keep your gains and get that shredded look.
Hey, this is Colin DeWay. If you want to master your metabolism and create forever results, start that process now by subscribing and click on that bell notification so you don't miss anything. Alright, there are several strategies you can take to make sure you keep that hard-earned muscle, but before we get into that, there's something very important you should know. And that is when it comes to a successful cut and getting that look you really want, you're probably going to have to lose more weight than you think. It seems like most of the time what we think we're going to look like at a certain weight isn't really even that close, and you still need to drop another 10-20 pounds before you reach that look. Our bodies just hold a lot more fat than we think they do. So in order to reach that kind of shredded look that you're looking for, you need to make sure you have plenty of patience. Because the reality is, the faster you lose weight, the more likely you are to lose muscle as well. So with that, the first thing you need to consider is the pace of weight loss that you're after. And to me, if you want to hold on to as much muscle as possible, you don't want to lose more than about 1% of your body weight on average per week. And that 1% is like the max, and to be perfectly honest, if you really truly want to hold on to all the muscle you can, you probably want to go even a little bit slower than that and even bring it down to around 0.5% per week. Of course, how much weight you have to lose has to factor in as well. The more you have to lose, the more you're probably going to want to have a little bit faster pace in the beginning stages at least, and the leaner you are and the less weight you have to lose, the more it makes sense to lose a little bit less per week. As I shoot this, I'm about 6 weeks out from my physique show where maintaining your muscle is massively important. And I've been cutting for 22 weeks total. Of those 22 weeks, 15 of them saw an average weekly drop of less than 1 pound. I've lost 16.6 pounds total, which is an average of about 0.7 pounds per week. So for someone who started at 182 pounds, that actually works out to be roughly about 0.5% per week on average. Patience is the name of the game, my friend, and there's more benefits than just holding on to muscle when you can be more patient. When you take a slower approach, you're able to eat more food, do less cardio. You're way less likely to feel the effects of dieting as much. You're going to be able to perform better, and on and on and on. Plus, the more food that you can eat while dieting, the better, because remember, your metabolism is adaptive, and therefore it will adapt to whatever you do. And this means if you're eating more food and doing less cardio, once your body does adapt, you'll be able to make more adjustments and keep the process going. Whereas if you drop your calories really low right away and you're doing a bunch of cardio, not only are you going to sacrifice more muscle during the process, but you're also going to adapt to those lower calories. Eventually you'll get stuck and it'll make it really hard to reach your final goal. Now another important factor to make sure you're hanging on to that hard-earned muscle is to make sure you keep your protein high during your dieting phase. Protein is not only what helps you build muscle, but it's also what helps you retain muscle when dieting. And to me, the leaner you get and the less you're eating, the more benefits you get from protein. So I personally recommend when you start your dieting phase, you start at 1 gram per pound of body weight, and then you just keep it there throughout your dieting phase. So even if you started at 190 pounds and you wanted to get down to 160, you would stay at that 190 grams of protein throughout your entire cut. Not only does protein help you keep your muscle, but it also is the most satiating macronutrient, so it helps you feel full as your calories get lower. It also has by far the highest thermic effect of food of the 3 macronutrients, so you burn more calories eating protein than you would through carbs or fat. Now as far as your carb and fat split, I do like to keep carbs as high as possible for most people, just because it is going to aid in performance and help you keep that muscle glycogen high, and that's only going to be able to help you train more effectively, which we're going to talk about pretty soon, is also really important to make sure you keep your muscle. And that being said, fat does play critical roles in things like hormones and digestion, so we don't want to just eliminate fat and get them too low, so we need to make sure we have a balance. Also keep in mind that everyone is unique, and while a lot of people tend to perform better and feel better and have more energy on more carbs, some people just do better with more fat. And if you find that you have higher energy levels and just feel better with more fat and less carbs, by all means do what works best for you. But in general, I recommend about 20 to 30% of your calories to come from fat. You don't want to go too much below 20% in most cases. And for females, I really don't like to get below about 30 to 40 grams of fat. And for males, less than about 40 to 50 grams. Now there are some other strategies we can take with nutrition to make sure we're hanging on to as much muscle as possible. For instance, doing things like taking double refeeds and diet breaks. And as far as double refeeds go, there's actually some really cool research that's on its way out right now. My friend Lauren Conlon did a video about this earlier this year with Dr. Bill Campbell out of USF, which is actually where I'm going to be going back to school here this winter. And they were talking about this study that's coming out where they did a double refeed approach. To my knowledge, this paper isn't actually out yet, so I'll have to take their word for it, but it's coming out. I don't know why they would lie about it. But anyway, in this study, they did 7 weeks of dieting where they took one group and they had them diet on the exact same macros for 7 weeks straight, and then a different group who did the 7 weeks of dieting equated total macros, but did it in an approach where they had 2 refeed days on back-to-back days each week. Both groups ended up losing the same amount of fat, but the group that did the 7 weeks of the exact same macros lost about 3 pounds of muscle mass throughout, and the group that did the double refeed approach actually only lost about 1 pound on average for the study. Now, another important note about that study is the group that did the double refeed approach actually saw about half the metabolic drop that the group that did the exact same macros all the way through. So I just keep becoming a bigger and bigger fan of the double refeed approach, and I'm starting to implement it more and more with my clients, and even earlier than I was previously. And if you saw my recent video about carb cycling, you will know that you have to make the double refeed approach on back-to-back days. A single refeed does not seem to give you the same benefits in hormones and metabolism than back-to-back consecutive days does. Now, as far as diet breaks go, there actually is published research on this, and what they did was they had one group continuously diet for 16 straight weeks, and the other group did 2 weeks of dieting followed by 2 weeks of maintenance calories and repeated that until they did 16 total weeks of dieting. So keep in mind the group that did the diet breaks actually did 30 weeks versus 16, but the total amount of dieting was the same. And what they found was the group that did the diet breaks actually lost about 47% more fat than the other group did and retained more muscle mass. So yeah, while it does take longer, it just goes to show that by taking these breaks and having higher calories and not just constantly dieting all the time, you can keep your metabolism in a better spot, keep your hormones in a better spot, maintain more muscle mass, and just set yourself up to have a much better, more successful cut. Now, one more thing with regards to nutrition before I go on to the training side of things, and that is there is some research that shows that if you take BCAAs between meals, it can actually help you extend the amount of time that you can keep protein synthesis elevated before the next meal. So if you want to do every little thing you can to try to maintain as much muscle mass as possible, I recommend taking BCAAs about 2 hours after each protein-containing meal. As far as training goes, obviously it makes a big difference with regards to how much muscle you keep. However, there's a big mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to cutting, and that is they will completely switch up how they train as soon as they start their cutting phase. What they do is they start shortening their rest periods, they start doing more circuit style training, and they really try to keep their heart rate up all the time, trying to burn more calories. And while you certainly want to keep intensity up while training to make sure you keep your muscle, you don't really want to change how you train when it's time to cut. You want to keep doing what you've been doing to build the muscle to also keep the muscle. Now, with that being said, you might have to make some changes, especially as you get leaner and you get into a position where your leverages start to change, you're a little bit more prone to injury because you can't recover as well on lower calories. So maybe you have to avoid some bigger movements that are more likely to cause injury and change things up that way, but what you don't want to do is completely change your programming. You want to let fat loss or muscle building happen by changing your calories and your cardio to either create a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus. Also, you have to consider that with less calories, you're not going to be able to recover as well. So just blasting yourself all the time and going hard or going home is not likely to be a very efficient way to make sure you optimally lose fat and keep your muscle. And that brings me to cardio. I'm a big fan of utilizing more lower intensity cardio over higher intensity cardio, especially if you really want to keep as much muscle as possible. And that's because higher intensity cardio is harder to recover from. It's more likely to bleed over into your training and make everything suffer if you just feel like garbage all the time because you're so drained. And if recovery and training are going to suffer, you're more likely to lose additional muscle. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do HIIT, you just have to understand the drawbacks of it. And especially if time is limited, it might make more sense because that's the drawback of lower intensity cardio, is it just takes more time to do it. The big thing is you just have to understand the risks and drawbacks that come with it. And honestly, just picking up your regular walking game can be very helpful in losing fat and keeping muscle, and it's not going to drain you and it's not hard to recover from. Okay, there's a few other important factors that you need to consider when going through your fat loss phase. Keep in mind, the leaner you get, the less scale weight change matters, and you're going to see more changes in body composition that aren't going to be reflected as much on the scale. So make sure you're paying attention to other things, and this goes for all the time, but especially as you get leaner, things like pictures, measurements, how your clothes are fitting, and things like that, because those are all signs that things are happening. Also, another big factor is the longer that you've had muscle, the more likely you are to keep it. So there's real value in not just constantly jumping into a diet all the time, besides just the fact that it kind of destroys your metabolism and makes it really hard to lose fat. Building muscle just takes a lot of time, so make sure you're spending much more time building than you are cutting. And this way, when you've been doing this stuff for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, it's going to make it that much easier to hang on to the muscle that you have. Alright, there's something else that's very important that you need to make sure you consider when it comes to cardio, and that's not only what types you should do, but also how much and how to make adjustments throughout your dieting phase. But I have all that covered up in this video, so make sure you check that out next and make sure you set yourself up for a successful cut. If you have any questions, please just drop them in the comments below and I'll definitely get back to you. If you're interested in online coaching, just head to my website ColinDeWayTraining.com and go to online coaching and fill out the application, and I'll see you over at that cardio video.